Hello, everyone. This is Wyland with the FPV podcast again, and we are going into episode 6 of DRL. So, this is the New Orleans Mardi Gras finals. I definitely have a few things that I want to talk about, but before we talk about them, definitely watch the episode if you have not watched the episode. And also, these are just my quick thoughts, so they're right off the cuff, they're unedited. It's stuff that I just thought about when I'm watching the episode. So, once again, for this episode, I'm going to start with the main story, which I feel is still the track. So, back in episode 5, we talked about how the track was crashing out a lot of people, and there seemed to be some element of luck involved to see who actually earned the most points, who could actually finish the heats. So, in this one, we saw 6 of the top pilots, competing. They all know the track. This is their second go around in terms of flying it in competition. And we still saw a lot of crashing. So the question is this a good track design? Because if you watch the previous episodes, a lot of the crashing there was a whole lot less crashing. And most of the crashing occurred around midair collisions. At least that's what I remember in my recollection. But in this one, if I go back and I, recall the memories, I'm just going to remember a lot of pilots crashing out due to the track itself, not necessarily the midair collisions. So once again, you think about it, is this a good track? Because in racing, what you're seeing is, or what I think most people would want to see, is good competition between the pilots. Do you want to see the pilots tested in terms of just being able to get around the track? Is that something that's really good? Is that a good change of pace track, or does it require a different format? So instead of having them race against each other, can you build a really tight track and make it into like a time trial? So every one of them goes up individually, and the fastest time from start to finish is the person that wins the heat. I mean, is that a good format? Is that a good change of pace so that it keeps the series fresh, because like I said, at this point, everything starts to get a little repetitive. This is the third episode, and if you're not into the racing, it's going to feel repetitive and you might lose interest. So would it be a good idea to change up the track to be more difficult, or change up the format in which the pilot's competing in a different format, and then you have to have all of your 16 pilots compete in this particular format just to change it up? Just some thoughts that come through my mind. I think one of the most interesting points is that like a pilot like McStrawley, you can see that he is absolutely fearless. He goes out there, he is super fast, but he pushes that edge too often and he crashes out. I think there was only one heat in which he completed in first place, because most of the time he was first one out of the gate, super fast, but you always have this thought in the back of your brain saying, is he going to crash out because he is so fast? And this track is not conducive to having the fastest heat, because there's just so many areas where it's very easy to crash out because there's so many obstacles that causes crashes, or the lanes are so short that if you just miss your line by a little bit, something will snag you and you'll crash out. And on some of the other tracks, you can get back up in the air because there's plenty of flat area for you to skid and then get back into the air. In this one, it seems like you can get stuck a whole lot easier, and once you get stuck, you're pretty much out of it. It's actually the first one where I can recall where, when they hit something, the propellers actually failed them. In a lot of the other ones, they were still able to maintain and still fly on. So it's quite interesting, the question of, is this a good design? Is this a good track? So following that question, the next question is there a good strategy for this type of track? Because in the first 2 episodes, getting out, punching out, getting out to a lead, flying your own line worked really well for Gab and other pilots that got out. They were able to fly their own lines. They were able to clearly, define how fast they wanted to go, and it worked out. But in this particular track, if you're like Mistrali and you punched out and you're first and you're trying to keep that lead, and you're always skirting the edge of going out of control or missing your line, and you crash out, that doesn't help you. But if you hold back, now you're in the middle of the pack. And the problem with being in the middle of the pack with tight corridors and really hard obstacles is that now you have to deal with midair collisions. So it feels like there is, no matter what strategy you pick, there is an element of luck. It's like, are you going to be involved in those midair collisions? Are you going to be pushing too hard, in which you're just going to miss that line and that causes you to crash out? Because we saw a lot of gates get a lot of damage throughout this whole episode. So, like, the strategy, I don't think anybody really found a clear strategy that would work for this type of track. And I would still say that there was some element of luck to know who actually finished. Now, the person that stood out the most to me in terms of being able to challenge that element of luck was definitely Jed. I mean, some of the recoveries that he did when they highlighted him, they showed it in slow motion, was just absolutely amazing. Like when he was, putting too much gas or too much power or throttle, whatever you want to call it, going into the rafter gate, and watching him in like split millisecond being able to invert, compensate, roll back, get through the gate, and still not crash, or having somebody hit him and him still being able to recover. He called it luck, but all I saw was a lot of skill, and it was just amazing watching him recover. You can tell why he was the champion 2016 is because he doesn't, what do you say? He doesn't stress out, or he doesn't panic under those situations. It's like something went wrong. There's a way to fix it, and he's able to fix it without even thinking about it. And that's pretty amazing. I'm really glad that they highlighted those moments in which he was able to recover almost seemingly just out of, it's really muscle reflex for him, I guess. So I don't think I have an answer in terms of strategy, but my answer in terms of the track is that I don't particularly like this type of track design unless there's a purpose to it, like there is like a specific format that's geared toward this type of track. And I don't think the format they ran, just running heats and first one to the gate wins, is the right format for this type of track design. But that's just my personal opinion on that. Let's go ahead and move on to the pilots. So very quickly, let's go ahead and run down the pilots. I don't want this episode to be too long. Jet, what I noticed most about him was that he is confident when it comes to technical tracks. He's very comfortable flying in those little tight corridors, and he's just extremely confident in terms of being able to recover his quad when he gets into a bad situation, or even during midair collisions. He had such amazing recoverability during those collisions, and he won this particular race. But a lot of it was down to raw skill that he had and he brought to the table. And kudos to him. Glad he's actually back in it, and hopefully we'll see him in the championship. But he sure made life tough on himself in that last heat when he crashed out right at the very beginning. I mean, that was that was a very critical mistake right there, but he still won out. It was just, he left it all in the hands of other pilots on whether or not he was going to get first place. He already clinched a podium spot, which is the most important thing in order to qualify for the playoffs. He's still got a road ahead of him, but he's one step closer now. Nurk, he's definitely coming into his own. It's like he had a bad showing, and he didn't let that sink him. And in the last two races, he's finding his groove and his strategy. It's really working for him. It's one of those things where it's really interesting to watch him because he is probably the pilot that takes advantages of other people's mistakes the most. He doesn't really flash at the beginning of the race, but when he gets a chance, he's definitely able to finish most races and finishes strong. Gab 707, he's still podium in this race, which puts him at 2 first and 1 at third. Still the person to beat in my opinion, but you can definitely tell there's some chinks in his armor. There's some weaknesses in his game, and I'm sure that's going to give confidence to the other pilots, knowing that he's beatable. And there are certain tracks that he likes to play a little bit more conservatively on, and sometimes when he's stuck in traffic as well, he's going to make his mistakes just as much. Still probably the best person in terms of using those big sweepy lines. I mean, he's just really good at moving momentum on his quad, and that's what makes him so fast, is that every single time you see him fly, when he gets out into space, he knows the line that's going to be able to keep momentum on his quad, and that makes that quad so fast, and it's just really cool to watch him fly. Congrats to those three on the podium wins. Wild Willie, I don't know why, but he's the type of pilot that I always expect to see him on the podium, and it was just unexpected to actually see him not on the podium. But like I said, in this particular episode, there was so much crashing. There was just so much an element of luck, in my opinion, or maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's more like the ability not to crash out by not taking too many risks, because there were a lot of pilots that they still wanted to compete hard, and you had to take a lot of risk on this track to compete with the best. And for a lot of them it didn't work out, but those four pilots, actually, was it four? Yeah, those four pilots really stood out, and it was a fun episode to watch. It's definitely different from the first two episodes, and we'll see if the next episode follows the first two episodes or follows this episode. One last thought before I cut out is that the whole profiling, like when you watch the pilots come in and they have this dark background and the dynamic shadows with the high contrast, it really doesn't work. In my opinion, it doesn't work because, they're trying to portray them as badasses, but every single time the pilots are talking, they're talking to each other, they're so happy, they're hugging each other, they're positive. It just doesn't really fit in with the profiles that they set up. It's like it may work for some of the pilots. They may be that way, they're the strong, dark, stoic type, but like for pilots like Wild Willie, in which he's always happy-go-lucky all the time, it's like, does that really work? I mean, do all of them need to have this dark cast and the high contrasting colors or dark shadows and stuff like that? It just, I don't know, every single time I watch that, it's like, what, that just doesn't work. They should try something different. Anyways, that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed the episodes, and I will catch you next week, in which we go to level 4.